Hello, and welcome to the week 4 recap of Inside the OPEX Method with myself, Candace Dixon, and CEO of OPEX and CoachRx, Carl Hardwick. We're having a really exciting week over here behind the scenes at OPEX. We've got lots happening, including office hours that Carl just got out of, and I happened to miss today, but I can't wait to hear about. This week inside the OPEX Method, we are still focusing on program design, but we have moved over into the aerobic side of things. We focus a lot on OPEX sustain. And we talked about aerobic capacity. We introduced these coaches to the OPEX map progressions and map framework. So there was a lot, I think, like eyes opening, ears opening, just excitement all around. And I think what I heard from most coaches, and you tell me if you think differently, is that you in the lecture just kind of changed their perspective on programming aerobics, making aerobics something clients are excited about, buy into. So let's start there.
Yeah. When you say that, I'm like, okay, like what are those big things, right? Like the big messages that we tried to really get across today, and or not today, sorry. Well, today as well as Tuesday and Thursday. Today we just jumped off of office hours, and man, just such really good questions in terms of implementation, right? Like real world implementation and application. And I won't get too deep into this because no one really has context, but something that we got into today was this whole concept of principles just being kind of like that guiding light a little bit, where it's like it gives us the right direction to go. But when we start to get dogmatic and we're like, oh, we can't veer away from these principles at all, we start to get into trouble, right? Like we're just like super dogmatic in our approach, and we like put up a barrier for people. So we talked a lot about that today, because the conversation was around implementation of aerobic work in the real world outside of the principles, because we talk about training age, and we talk about pacing, and we talk about long to short, and we talk about doing these particular things principally and why we ought to do these things principally. But then you get a client that comes in and is like, well, what about this person? Or what about that person? And that was the fun part about this morning, just being able to wrestle with those ideas with people and actually go through example progressions. Like I told these guys today, I was like, every time you guys ask a question, like my head literally pulls up a calendar and it thinks about like what's on day 1 and day 2 and day 3. So it was fun because we talked about actual aerobic progressions, whether it's like cyclical or mixed or running progressions, and what we kind of see in, typical running programs, and the principles that even sit in those really good running programs. So anyway, yeah, we hit a lot this week.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I know most of you guys who are following this series with Carl and I recapping each week are also aware that we have Dr. David Skolnick, who's an awesome DPT and strength coach, going through the program with us and also kind of documenting from a coach's perspective what he's experienced as he goes through the program. And he thought this week would be the most challenging week for him as a strength coach who's obviously very comfortable prescribing resistance training, but has less exposure to the frequency of prescription around aerobics, and was just like, I think really the posts that he has shared this week have made it clear that this has been eye-opening for him, and he's already testing out and building aerobic progressions based on the map system that we've shared. And really his thought was like, just trusting the process. I thought it was very interesting. Yesterday, he made a reel just kind of updating us on what he learned coming out of labs. And he said, the thing that stood out to him is that someone made the comment that most clients don't get bored of aerobics. It's most coaches get bored of prescribing aerobics, or they think that their clients are going to get bored. And so that he was like, I'm just going to hold firm, and I have really good consultations and in-person sessions in place to be able to gauge whether a client is or is not in fact bored. But I'm going to trust these map progressions. And he was so excited to see how his clients kind of fared going through, 6-8 weeks of some progressions.
Yeah. Something I hit on today, around like effectiveness of aerobic training and what an effective aerobic program usually looks like. And I was like, guys, the most simple is always the most effective in aerobic training. And it's like our brains are always telling us as coaches, most coaches, our brains are always telling us like it needs to be more complex. There needs to be more nuance here, because if there's not, the client's going to get bored, or maybe like the dose isn't high enough, or whatever the case is. And it's like, not only is the simplest work in aerobics the most effective, but it's actually the most challenging as well, right? Like think about a time where, we've ever sat on a bike and we did like tough aerobic intervals on the bike, where we're on that bike for 4 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is. And we have to hold the pace, and we can't like hide from it. Like we can't transition to another thing. We can't like put our hands on our knees and take a breath. It's like, we're just on that thing and we're going. It's so simple, but the dose is actually so high, and most people can find a rhythm in that. So it's effective, it's challenging, and it's where we should lean most of the time with aerobic work, depending on what the goal of that aerobic work is. And I think that's also extremely important, right? Like we have to always understand, why are we doing these things? So yeah, I like that. I like that David shared that. And Melissa also shared something very similar today in office hours, where, Melissa Guitron, or one of our assistant instructors, she just wanted to put it out there, like, guys, I think that we're overthinking and overcomplicating our prescriptions. Like because something that coaches ask us quite often, it's like, how do we get buy-in to do aerobic work? And Melissa was like, I've worked with thousands of clients, and I can think of maybe a couple times, or maybe she said 0 times, where I had to like convince someone that it was good for them. It was like, they all just did it, right? It was like, they saw results, they felt great, so on and so forth. So her point was, I think that we overthink it, and we're like putting, our need for something to be more complex and complicated into our clients. So that's more of a coach thing. But what I pointed out on that, just because I know Melissa really well, I'm like, Melissa, you've been doing this for well over a decade. You have a very good reputation in your community. OPEX Cura has been, thriving for many years. I was like, what we have to realize is that when people come to you, they already come to you with a level of trust. So you might not get a lot of that pushback, because people are just like, oh, this is Melissa. I have a friend that worked with her, or I just see what they're doing in the community, and she's like the subject matter expert. So they're just taking your word for it because you have that trust. So if we're getting pushback from our clients, we have to really think about, why are we getting that pushback? I would say that there's probably a lack of trust there, which is normal for a lot of coaches when they first start working with a client. Like, you have to earn your client's trust. You can't just like expect them to come in the door and automatically have it, unless we have a great reputation like a Melissa Guitron. So I think that trust piece is really important. But I also think that we need to, and this is with everything, I'm going to say this every week, we need to connect what people find important to how this work that we're giving them is going to increase what they already find important. So we need to find those bridges between your values and your priorities, and then this aerobic work that we're going to give you.
Absolutely. Something that I know everyone wants to like get inside the black box of when they enter the OPEX method, or previously CCP, is map progressions. So not that we want to give away too much of the secret sauce, but could you just give an overview of like, what is map? Because it's this very mysterious thing that everyone wants to have access to.
I'm sure we have like a ton of like free resources that people could just like Google.
We do.
It's not something that we're trying to hide, but so MAP is just, it's a framework that we work inside of to give coaches kind of a principled lens in how they progress aerobic work. So MAP stands for maximum aerobic power. And we have MAP 10 all the way down to MAP 1. Okay. And each one of those maps have characteristics that are individual to that map. So each one of them have an about time that you work, right? They each have rest time associated with them. They each have how many sets should I do in a training session. They each have, 7 of them have blocks. So a block is let's say I do 3 sets, and then, I'm resting 2 minutes between those sets. And then maybe I want to rest 5 minutes, and then I want to do that times 2 blocks. So sometimes we break things into blocks because there's like peripheral fatigue that's not like, cardiovascular fatigue that we have to take into context. So we have work time, we have rest time, we have sets, we have blocks. And then we also have what pace should we attack it at. So because each map has a work time associated with it, we look at that pace for training, not testing, that pace being about 4 times the work time. So to break that down and give you an example, if you're doing 30 minutes of work, so we call 30 minutes of aerobics map 9. So if we're doing that, our pace should actually be 4 times that 30 minutes. So what that means is that you're going at your 2-hour pace. So when people realize that, they're like, oh my goodness, that's slow. And it's like, yes, that is slow, right? And then if we go all the way down to map 1, so we start talking about 30 seconds of work, and then rest time is about 1-to-1 in these lower maps. We're going to go 30 seconds of work. If we look at our pace, that's about 4 times 30 seconds. So we're going at our 2-minute pace. So I think this will hit for a lot of people. If you've ever done a 500 meter row, like a test, and your max 500 meter row is 2 minutes per 500 meters. And it's like, that's your race pace. What we would look at that, we would say, hey, that's actually your map 1 pace. Because if we divide that by 4, that's 30 seconds. So when you do map 1 intervals, you're actually attacking it at your 500 meter row pace if you're doing that, those intervals on a rower. So people can kind of wrap their head around how that pace is associated with that work time. And that's really important because I think a lot of people inherently, when they do aerobic work, they're just like, they're so performance minded. They're just like, I just need to do as much work as I can within this time. And that's not training at all. So we're trying to teach coaches, what does an aerobic progression look like? And a big characteristic of aerobic work that's also connected to this continuum is this concept of sustainability, repeatability, and patience. So aerobic work teaches us those things. So if we don't exhibit those things while we do aerobic work, we're missing out on a lot. So that's the map continuum. We go from map 10 all the way to map 1. Our actual progression starts at map 9. Map 10, we'll call that like zone 1. So that's just moving. So there's no progressive map 10 work. So it's map 9 to map 1. We want everyone to go through that continuum because we want them to learn their gears. And then once they learn their gears, now the world is their oyster, right? They do tough aerobic work, they do easy aerobic work, and they just implement that in program design. But an entire progression from 9 to 1, 8 weeks per map, that's 1.44 years. So almost a year and a half of an aerobic progression. So you got to be patient, buckle in.
Yeah. It's amazing though, to see the confidence that really going deep on understanding map and all the progressions within, and the level of confidence that coaches come out of this week and really all of the method with, because they have this framework and this knowledge. In addition to that, I don't know that most people really take advantage of this, but within LearnerX, in the programs library, and within the programs library of CoachRX, there are a lot of well-crafted progressions based on the map structure. So make sure that, I guess that could be a tip that we give away today, is like, if you are active in CoachRX and coaching your clients, check out the programs library and look for the different map progressions and see from an inspiration standpoint, what was the desired outcome of this particular progression? What did that look like? There's so much you can learn from doing that. And then if you're in LearnerX, we not only have the program component there, but there is also some additional education and learning provided with each program sample in there. And then, of course, there's obviously a lot of EST related courses inside LearnerX as well that can help you understand this at a deeper level. But those inside the method, it is so cool to see the level of confidence that comes out of this week.
Yep. Yeah, a big thing that we talked about today, this is another nugget that Melissa brought up, was guys, we got to be doing this stuff, because there was a lot of questions around like how this feels, how that feels, what's appropriate, what's not. It's not wise to take theory and to put that theory into practice with a lot of people if you've never actually felt that yourself. So a big piece of advice for all coaches is to do some aerobic work. Yeah, do some aerobic work.
Commit to that a little over a year.
Yeah, do some really structured aerobic work, and then also do unstructured aerobic work, and just like find out what works, what doesn't. Yeah, because I think when we start to get like really cute with aerobic work and we give that to people without understanding the ramifications of trying to make some of these contractions sustainable. If we had never done them ourselves, we might not appreciate how that actually feels. And it could be something so simple, right? It's like, I want you to row and I want you to do kettlebell swings and I want you to do burpees. It's like, yeah, do that for 15 minutes and just think about the amount of hip extension and hip flexion that you're going through over those 15 minutes. And you might not put those things together for, a client that doesn't do a high volume of hip flexion and hip extension, right? So just little nuances like that, that'll just make you a little bit wiser in terms of exercise selection and aerobics. And it all will probably bring you back to like, hey, let's just keep it cyclical. Let's keep it simple. And let's make it really measurable.
Yep. I don't know. Is there anything that you want to share? I know we didn't go too deep on this, but obviously you just mentioned cyclical versus mixed. And that's something that we go deep on inside the method as well. But anything that you want to share there about our approach to that or thoughts around that?
Yeah. So inside of that progression, we talk about, over that map 9 to map 1 progression, what does the work actually look like? Because there's a lot of things that you can throw in there. Principally, what we want coaches to do is that we want them to progress their clients from understanding and learning their gears through cyclical implements first. And then once they have accomplished that, and once they do that, then maybe open them up to like mixed cyclical sessions. So like going from like a rower to a skier or a bike to a Versa climber or whatever the case is. And then finally, if you really want them to do mixed work, so by mixed work, we're talking about taking patterns that you would usually do in resistance training and then trying to make those patterns aerobic in aerobic training. Make sure that these people know their gears and they've done at least the cyclical stuff first. But the progression model that we lay out is we say cyclical first. Once you get through that, then you can add some mixed cyclical stuff in. And then once you get through that, then you can add some mixed stuff in. Again, don't be dogmatic with that. It's like, the consequences of not doing that are fairly low. Like, it's not a big deal if you row and have someone do farmer carries. That's like not anathema. You're not going to like burn, right? But just think about that principally, and it'll kind of guide you down the right direction from a progressive standpoint in aerobics.
And I'm assuming your logic there, Carl, is just thinking about obviously the skills that have to be developed in order to be able to make some of those movements or contractions actually aerobic, right? Like they have to have the aerobic skill first, and then they have to have the skill with the exercise selection, and then they have to have the ability to make that movement aerobic.
Yeah. So I think a lot of coaches understood when I said this on Tuesday. I said, guys, we have to think about aerobic work as like rhythmic work, right? Like you need to find a rhythm and then you need to keep that rhythm. Okay. So what I mean by that, it's like, can you keep a rhythm or cadence when someone's asking you to do burpees and then do some box jumps and then go to the rower and do that? If you can, awesome, right? Like you're making those contractions rhythmic and aerobic. If you can't, if your hands are on your knees, or you have to think for a second before you pick up a kettlebell to do a kettlebell swing. If your heart rate gets so high that you just have to like take a break, it's not rhythmic, right? So the goal in aerobics is to make everything rhythmic, to make everything based on a cadence, and to make everything smooth and sustainable. If you can't do that, it's not a big deal. Just keep that out of your aerobic work. You're just like, you may as well just do like an A1 through A4 with 15 seconds rest and do like a GBC resistance program. There's nothing wrong with that, but just keep that in resistance. So I think a lot of people think that they have to like add a lot of things to aerobics because, quite frankly, it's for entertainment, really. But if someone can just get into that rhythm in aerobics, they're gonna enjoy it a lot more than every 15 seconds they have to like take a second and take a breather.
Yep. No, I love that. What's one tip for those following along that aren't in the mentorship currently, but maybe are kind of trying to implement some things on their own week by week? Is there some takeaway that we could give them to try out this week?
The one thing that comes to mind is less so like try this out. It's more so understand. So I think that it's very beneficial for a coach to understand the utility of aerobic work. Okay. And there's so much utility in aerobic work. Like the way that we started off Tuesday in lecture was we talked about aerobic work being the foundation of all fitness. And we brought that back to, really understanding the three main energy systems and how nothing works without the aerobic system. Okay. And then we transfer that into life, right? Like living on a daily basis, walking, maybe jogging, maybe walking up a hill, walking up a mountain, riding your bike, all of those things. We need an aerobic foundation to be able to do those things. Okay. So, understanding the utility, right? Building capacity to do life, understanding that it is the foundation for recovery, understanding that, longevity, we've talked about longevity for a really long time, but it actually creates an environment for longevity at a cellular level, literally, right? Mitochondria and all of those really good things, right? So understanding those things, understanding that it can actually move outside of just the gym, right? And teach you patience and to be present and to not be in a hurry, and that it's actually a good thing. I won't go too deep into this. We talked about this today. It's actually good to be bored. I asked the group today, I said, when's the last time you guys were bored? And everyone's like, I don't remember. And I was like, remember when we were like kids? I don't know how old everyone is, but remember when we were kids and we were like, I'm bored. It was like, we had a couple channels that we could watch. Maybe I'm not that old, but I didn't have cable when I was a kid. So literally there was a couple channels that we could watch. We didn't have cell phones. The internet wasn't a big thing. So it's like, we were just like bored, right? But there's a lot of really good things around being bored and not being constantly distracted. Sorry, I won't go down too much of a rabbit hole, but bringing that back to aerobics, maybe it's okay to like have to just like be there, be present, work through that quote unquote boredom. Because I think that builds some callus, some resilience, builds this concept of repeatability and sustainability, and not always focusing on like performance, right? So I think we can look at aerobics through a different lens in that, and it makes everything else better. It allows us to recover from our strength training more effectively. It allows cognitive function to literally function at a higher level. It's safe for everyone, right? Depending on what you give them, it's safe. It's very accessible. Okay. If someone can't walk long distances, that's their progression, right? Your progression is, I want you to go from 10 to 15 to 20 to 30 to 60 minutes of just going out and walking. So it's extremely accessible. We can do it for the rest of our lives, or we should at least make it a goal to be able to do it for the rest of our lives, right? It's very connected to physical autonomy and being able to, do the things that we want to do on a day-by-day basis. I'll end it there. There's a couple more, but I can go on. I'm making it long. So understand the benefits outside of, my aerobic capacity is better. Understand the benefits of it. And also realize I didn't say anything about, you're going to burn fat. You know what I mean? I didn't say anything, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's also a benefit of aerobic work. Like, you oxidize fat cells more effectively. But most people don't really care about that. Most people care about like the way that something makes them feel, and aerobic work above anything. If someone can break through that barrier of like, just like doing it, they just feel really good, because everything comes back to what we talked about earlier this week. Blood flow heals like all things. Okay. And there's no better way to induce blood flow than aerobic work. So that's my pitch. Do aerobic work.
That was such a good reminder. Yeah, we can all learn something, take something away from that. Well, give us a teaser of what's to come next week.
The way that I ended today's office hours is I said, okay, guys, next week we're going to talk about why we shouldn't do anaerobic work, or at least most of us. So next week we're going to talk about OPEX pain or anaerobic work. And I kind of like, I'm half joking when I say that. But what we really need people to understand is that not everyone needs to do painful exercise. Not everyone needs to do glycolytic focused exercise. We can actually get a lot of that from the lower ends of MAP training and make that stuff repeatable. So next week, we're going to talk about anaerobic work. And once we go down that rabbit hole, it gets really sports specific, where essentially we get to the end of it and it's like, well, who is this useful for? If someone is going to utilize this energy system in their sport, or someone that for whatever reason needs some kind of metabolic boost, right? Short-term metabolic boost. Everyone else doesn't need it. But I think it's important to understand the system really well, to understand how it's different than aerobic training. Because if we understand that, then I think that most of us can get on board like, oh, we don't need to give people like unbelievably tough, like pennies in their mouth feeling anaerobic work. So that's what we're talking about next week, anaerobics.
I love it. Well, thank you for just recapping the week and getting us hyped for next. We also have some other exciting things that are very related to this time of year, which most people start to, drip out some fun things for the festivities of the holiday this time of year. So we may have some exciting things coming for you next week that have to do with that. But we hope that you guys are following along, implementing some of these tips each week. We remember these lives you can find them on the OPEX YouTube channel under the lives tab. Weekly blogs that are associated with these recaps are up on opexfit.com on the blog, as well as documenting David's experience week over week. So check those out. And then if you are at all interested, the January cohort is already starting to get a lot of traction. We haven't officially opened enrollment for that, but the team is taking calls and having conversations about that. And there already is a lot of interest there. So if you do have interest, be sure to get on a call and just explore, hey, is this the right time in your coaching career to take your education to the next level and to really think about establishing solid systems for your practice. Because keep in mind, not only are the students going through the method learning a lot, but each week they are implementing everything that they learn inside of CoachRx and coming out of this 10 weeks with their coaching systems ready and built and ready to rock for 2026. So if you're interested, jump on a call. We would love to chat with you. The team is ready to rock. And if it's not the right fit for you, like there is no hard feelings. We have a ton of other free resources or other resources that we can guide you to make sure that you have the answers to the questions that are popping in your head and keeping you up at night. But that is it for us today. We will see you next week. Any last words?
Nope. You said all my words. Thank you.
Deal. Chat soon, guys. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back next week.
Bye.